Welcome to Lazy Reviews. My name is Arvid, and I'm spending much of my spare time watching movies. A lot of these movies turn out to be quite bad, but some of them are also quite good, and that's why I'm now talking about these movies and movie franchises online so that I can give you my recommendations for which movies and which franchises that might be worth your time and which ones you should just stay the hell away from. And today it's time to talk about one of the better franchises out there, the Friday the 13th series. At the moment, there are 12 movies in this movie franchise, and they are more streamlined than several other horror movie franchises, so there will be less spoiler warnings, and there will also be less reason to dive deeply into the plot of each film compared to the two other series I talked about so far, the Puppet Master franchise and Child's Play series. So it will probably be more focused about entertainment value of each film. And the entertainment value in this franchise stems a lot from, well, the kills. It's really about the kills and some of the gimmicks between kills. But this is really, that's the core element of slasher movies. And Friday the 13th, in many ways, perfected this. That's really what this all comes down to. I will also be talking about other things, and there are other qualities to these movies, but the main qualities are the kills. Anyway, let's get started with the first one. Friday the 13th came out in 1980, and this was a time where the slasher genre was really picking up pace and where it was kind of finding itself and finding its tropes. All this pretty much starting with Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978. Although it's not the first slasher, it's really what kicked off this slasher craze that took off in the late 70s and especially from the early 80s. But as with many other slashers of this time, like The Burning or Prom Night, it hasn't really perfected its tropes yet, and it still feels a bit underwhelming if you look at what happens to the series and what happens to slasher movies in general. During the 80s, this does feel old and a bit underwhelming, perhaps a bit dull in terms of its kills. But that's to say that actually the first Friday the 13th movie is one of the only ones in the franchise where the story is actually quite decent and where, yes, the kills are still the main focus of it, but because it's the first movie in this franchise and the first movie and one of the first like real slasher movies that came out at this time, it does feel like a bit unique, like a movie in its own right. So yes, it shares many of the shortcomings and benefits of being an early 80s slasher film. And I know it has an atmosphere that will make it still recommendable and watchable today, but it's definitely not the most entertaining in the franchise. And as for the majority of the Friday the 13th movies, this one is set at Camp Crystal Lake in New Jersey and follows a group of horny young camp counselors who are murdered off one by one before the summer holiday season really sets off, meaning that there are no small children around. And as the filming location, director, screenwriter, and producers of the film change from movie to movie, the lake and the tone and the way it's shot will change for pretty much every movie. Some of the look will retain the same, but given that it will be a different location every single time, the lake will never look the same, the house will never look the same, and the thing is, you don't care. It doesn't really matter. It really has no impact on your viewing experience of this. The first film is probably most famous for the way Kevin Bacon is killed off and the bow and arrow kill scene later in the film, and also for having the main plot twist of the series, which won't really have a huge impact on the rest of the films, as the plot twist means that the rest of the killers of the franchise are not the same person as the killer in the first franchise. And the movie also ends on a cliffhanger that I think a lot of people are aware of, even if they haven't seen the film, but I still won't spoil it. But that cliffhanger ultimately ends up making the sequels in the universe confusing because, from my understanding, it is supposed to be canon. But for other people, it's simply just meant as a shocking way to end the film because the more you think about it, the less meaning the ending makes. But I don't know. It's just how the movie ends, and it's fine. Next movie doesn't really care about that ending. It does care about other aspects of the movie, but it doesn't really care about that aspect of the ending. But I think with that, we should move on to the second film. So, Friday the 13th Part 2 came out a year later in 1981, and visually and stylistically, it feels very much like the first movie. In that sense, it feels very much like a sequel. Again, same location this time. Killer is Jason Voorhees, and this is the Jason, the backhead Jason. If you're aware, Jason Voorhees is famous for wearing a hockey mask, but he doesn't wear that yet. In this one, he wears a silly bag over his head, and I think this movie doesn't. It's not really famous for any of its kills. A lot of them happen with a knife and are not too exciting. But what this movie does that is kind of neat is that it splits up the group with half of it going to town to have some drinks, meaning that they will come back later when everybody's intoxicated. No, sorry, when they're intoxicated and come back to the situation. So it kind of splits up the killing and the tension into two, which is a decent way of adding some more dimensions to the characters. And also, not a smoking gun, but you constantly have in mind that there will always be the potential that there will be these people who come to the rescue, or just that there will be more people to be added to the kill list later, essentially. And I don't know, that's actually quite neat. The movie also, especially in this sense, is a direct sequel, in that the ending of it is playing a lot on the ending of the first one. Not the weird part of the first of that ending. Again, not gonna spoil it, but yeah, and what it does there is actually quite neat. This aspect of the franchise of the story is really not used much, if at all, throughout the rest of the movie. So it's only something that holds true for the first two movies, where they try to have a story arc. I like the idea of the story arc. I like some of the execution of this film. It's a neat horror movie. I think overall, some of the kills of the first one are better, but I do think that as a film, this part two is better than the first Friday the 13th. And I would already now say that the first two movies are definitely recommendable, but they are nothing like the 80s slasher movies the other movies we will get later that are definitely like 80s slasher movies in the way aficionados of this genre love them and want them. Again, they are early slasher films of early 80s, late 70s period, and they feel like it. They're more toned down. They are not over the top 80s in the same way that appeals to nostalgia. In the same sense, they're still having that late 70s, early 80s look with fairly dull clothes. People look ordinary, the scenery is ordinary, nothing is really over the top. There's no overindulgence in anything, and that has its own charm, but I think what people like about Friday the 13th is the overindulgence of the murders, is the insane way the characters act or the stupid situations they're put in. The two first movies are more realistic in that sense. So yeah, I think that I've said enough about the first two movies. Now we'll go to the third one, which is part 3, of course, which came out yet another year later in 1982. And I think this one is definitely one of my favorites in the genre. Not in the genre, it's one of my favorites in the series. And it's also the first one that definitely feels 80s. It has a biker gang with rough chicks and leather and chains, and all that people who are just ruffians for the purpose of being ruffians. And they just invade or infringe on this town where they harass, and if people fight back, the hell gonna have to pay or whatever. Hells have to pay something, taxes, I don't know. Anyway, so this biker gang gets intertangled with our camp counselors, who now have a barn. I don't know why there's a barn at the camp. This time it really doesn't look like a camp. It doesn't really have much of the flair of the first, not flair, but much of the first two movies play more with the scenery, I guess, and more with the location. This one just feels a bit odd, where you don't really get a feeling that there will be children hanging out during the summer. I think this is also the first one that actually introduces characters you remember, because the series don't just have an interesting killer or interesting killers, because I should say that the actor playing Jason Voorhees does change quite a lot over the span of this franchise, meaning that in some movies he is only slightly taller than the average man and doesn't look that huge and intimidating, while in some others he's huge. It looks like a goddamn beast. So each Jason has his own personality, more or less. There are some actors that do play the role again and again, but most Jasons look different. And also in the movies where his face is revealed, and it is revealed at moments in most of the movies, his face completely changes from for each movie. Early on, I think he looks more like just a deformed guy, whereas later just, maybe also as a result of being messed up in every single movie, he starts just looking more and more destroyed and evil and non-human. So yeah, there's that. And what we get here is we get three bikers, whereas the only one of them I remember is the biker chick, which has a cool look. Then we have the hippie guy who looks like, is it Chong from Cheech and Chong? I always forget who is who. So the white guy from that one. And we have the overweight curly hair guy. And the only kill I remember from this movie just being somewhat interesting is the kill is when he dies. All of the kills in this movie are mostly forgettable, except not even the way Jason is killed, because so this movie, in the first movie, dabbled a bit with the supernatural, and I guess the fact that Jason Voorhees is presented as a human that just endures an inhuman amount of suffering, it does change throughout the film to becoming more and more supernatural. Here it's already the amount of times he should have died already by the end of this movie is getting a bit ridiculous, but it's just nothing compared to what will happen later in the series. So the Jason kill in this one is a bit boring. We have an ode to the ending of the first movie and at the end of this one, and it's just, again, weird. It's not really well explained. The movie kind of gives a throw-off line that kind of explains it, but in the end, no, it doesn't. So in terms of plot inconsistencies and problems with the world building, this franchise doesn't have as many as the Child's Play or the Puppet Master, but it does have some. And I think overall you don't really think about them too much, because the movies are never really about the plot, especially not for the first 8 or 9 movies. Then things, no, it was around the first 8 movies, then things really start getting weird. But yeah, I know, I'm just going off track here. So I think I already said enough about the third movie. It's fine. It's one of the better ones. It has a certain charm to it that I really liked. I need to also say that it opens up with a kill of just so. In this one, it becomes more and more apparent that Jason just kills whenever he can. That he comes across a house with 2 people living in the area near Crystal Lake, and he just kills them. In part 2, it opens up with him killing the one who survived from the first movie. So there's at least a reason why he would kill that person. And the movie also explains why he would kill camp counselors. But from this one out, he just kills. Especially camp counselors, but just pretty much anyone he can get to. Anyway, so that was part 3. What about part 4? Friday the 14th, part 4, the final chapter, might quite possibly be the best movie in the franchise. It kicks off with an amazing escape from the morgue by Jason Voorhees, where he just slaughters his way out. That's cool. It has the famous, infamous Crispin Glover dance scene where he just parties it all out like a lunatic, and I love it. It's amazing. If you haven't seen that, just Google Crispin Glover dance or Friday the 13th Part 4 dance. That's some amazing stuff. It has Corey Feldman in it playing Tommy Jarvis, a recurring character. And also, I should note in part 3 is where Jason Voorhees gets the hockey mask, and he will stick to the hockey mask for the rest of the franchise. So we are now in peak Friday the 13th territory. This one came out in 84, and it's just, it's some really good stuff. It also has some of the more memorable kills, like the spear or the harpoon to the groin. That's one of the more famous one, or the way Crispin Glover goes is also quite cool. Yeah, it has a lot of funny scenes. This is definitely, if not the best, it's top tier Friday the 13th stuff. And I will therefore not talk anymore about it. On to part 5. Part 5 came out the year after, in 1985, and is definitely the first bad Friday the 13th film. The first one I actually can't recommend anyone to see. This one takes place more, not in a mental asylum, but it's a place for, so it's no longer Camp Crystal Lake. It's a place for traumatized youth. And it follows Tommy Jarvis from the previous movie, who managed to take down Jason and survive. So it now follows him at this place where he's just a misfit. And he's still very, very traumatized by the events of part 4, obviously, understandably. It has a weird scene where a guy gets killed over basically nothing. And it feels a bit weird. These murders start taking place, of course. Jarvis tries to convince everyone that it's Jason. I won't say if it is, because yes, even though I don't think you should watch this, I still try not to do spoilers. But it's just, the ending is not that good. Most of the kills are not that good. The only memorable scene from it, from what I remember, is one of the kids there really likes 80s music, especially 80s pop, and she just has a room where it's completely decorated with those 80s posters, and she's just standing on her bed dancing. And that tells you how boring this movie is. That's what I remember from this film. A woman dancing in a room with things on the wall you can look at to be distracted from this movie. So, yes, I don't want to waste more time. On to part 6. Part 6, Jason Lives, came out a year later in 1986, and is usually considered to be the first horror or horror comedy in the franchise, because this one, delightfully, I would say, just has fun. It has a lot of fun with the premise, with the series. It has some, I would say, memorable scenes. It has a nice company team building exercise gone wrong with these people who walk around the woods playing paintball. And of course, Jason Voorhees interferes. But even then, I would say that I think what this movie is most memorable for is, from now on, Jason Voorhees is straight up undead. He did really die, trying to be spoiler free, he did die in a previous film. And Tommy Jarvis, who is again in this film, he's played by a different guy whenever he's playing in the movies, but he's still Tommy Jarvis, just looks a bit different. And he tries to get over his trauma with Jason after being released from this mental institution. So he goes to Crystal Lake, the town, which has now been renamed, goes to look up the grave of Jason with his friend, and takes a shovel and he starts revealing the grave of Jason and opens it to make sure that he's dead. He sees this corpse in this coffin, all half eaten by insects who are still also inside the body eating him up. And even though he is clearly dead, Jarvis just, he's so fed up with how this guy destroyed his life that he rips apart this big iron bar and just plunges it into Jason's chest. And the bar is then hit by lightning, and Jason returns to life. So yeah, now he's a zombie. And I also think that this is probably the part where Jason starts looking, this movie and also some of the later movies, the way he's portrayed is not really that nice. He's wearing this kind of weird green boiler, and the mask he's wearing is really ugly. I don't know, this is not the best Jason look, I would say. But again, it has nice kills, it has funny moments. Yeah, and then the rest of the movie is basically Tommy Jarvis and his female accomplice trying to convince the town that Jason is back, while the sheriff believes that because Tommy Jarvis escaped from the insane asylum and has all these called hallucinations, all these flashbacks with Jason. And he's my prime suspect by the sheriff. And although, yes, the city is still haunted by the memories of all these people who have died there, time has also passed. So I forgot the exact chronology. I will probably put it up here so you can see it. But this takes place at least 10, probably 15 years after the first movies. So it's also about a community that tries to move on and tries to forget the past. But it doesn't really explain how most people seem to not even have heard about these murders. They were tried to be covered up, but still, it's a bit weird. The movie also shows that Jason, despite being a zombie, shows mercy, is capable of showing mercy. He doesn't kill children when he has the opportunity to do so, even though he was, after Tommy Jarvis in the first film where he was, a kid. What can I say? It's a good movie. It's an enjoyable film. It has good kills, good moments. Overall, just great fun. And yeah, now that Jason is a zombie, you can expect him to take more damage than the previous movies. You can also expect that he will, of course, return again and again, which will happen. And with that being said, let's move on to part 7, which is the terrible film called New Blood. So this one came out in 1988 and again takes place at Camp Crystal Lake, though this time it's not with camp counselors. And it follows this girl who has telekinetic powers for some reason, because that's a part of the universe now. Okay, I guess if you can be a zombie, you can also be a psychic warrior. Sure. But yeah, she's in treatment at this lakeside residence at Crystal Lake. Jason turns up and, starts killing people. It has some of the most boring kills, one of the most boring plots. Well, I guess the plot itself is not boring, it's just the entire way the movie is made, filmed, shot. It's all boring. I will say that this would have been the second worst movie in the Friday the 13th franchise, with the exception of the ending. Because seeing a telekinetic psychic woman fight Jason using her powers is actually, it's mind-blowing. I had no idea that the franchise would go this way, go in this direction. But I am almost glad it did, because at this point I'm not even that worried about the world building anymore. I'm just curious as what the hell people will come up with next, because this set a precedent that will not really be delivered on later. The odd decisions that the movie takes, off supernatural decisions, the franchise will take from now on aren't really deserved, I would say. But before we get to those movies, we have to go to part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, where Jason is brought back alive. He has been stuck to the bottom of Lake Mead after what happened in the 7th installment, and he's being brought back to life by a boat that disturbs him from his sleep. And I would say Jason Takes Manhattan, that came out the year later in 89, is often considered a bad movie by a lot of people, or at least a subpar Jason movie. I think the reason why people hate it is because it's called Jason Takes Manhattan, but it's mostly shot on this riverboat. And again, it's again talking about the logic. So it's a riverboat in New Jersey on a lake that somehow is possible to sail to Manhattan. The logistics, the geography of all of this makes no sense, but again, at this point, who cares? It's just fun. And some of the kills in this movie are amazing. The opening with the small boat, and that's some really good stuff. It has some memorable characters. I think, unfortunately, one of the most memorable characters of this movie is this rock star, and she's killed off very early. I really wished she had been more in the movie. She's a cool character. It has this boxer, this Afro-American boxer, and that ends up being also one of the most famous kills when he goes up against Jason in a bare knuckle fight. That's amazing. It's oddly enough, it's from 89, and it ends up feeling like the most 80s of all the Friday the 13th movies. This is 80s from start to finish in all its glory. Yeah, it has good kills. It has memorable characters. Maybe the most memorable characters after the part 3. the ending of it that takes place in Manhattan makes little sense because for some reason Jason is only concerned with killing these camp counselors or riverboat counselors, I guess. He doesn't really care about any other in New York, so he just walks around New York surrounded by people and nobody really reacts to him, and he just stalks these people. There are, of course, because this is New York in the 80s, you have to have hidden alleys and steam and drug addicts and people being stabbed. It has a lot of really, really good scenes, but I think another reason why this one might not be people's favorite is it's already established he's a zombie. The ending of this movie, when he dies, and I don't mind spoiling this, he dies in a stream of toxic waste. But the toxic waste is just the sewer water. It's because New York is such a shitty place in the 80s, such a polluted place, that the sewer will kill you as if it's the toxic waste from the Toxic Avenger. I guess that doesn't kill him. Anyway, you get the meaning. But when Jason dies, he turns into a baby. Or a small kid. He turns into a small kid. Why? What? Why? What? This is so weird. It's such a weird decision. I don't know. I don't know what happened. This is... Yes, we had telekinesis in the previous film, but I don't know why they ended up doing this. Also, what does that do for the sequels? It's really weird. It's a really weird way because the first 8 movies, it's also the first 8 movies have part in the title. I guess the first one doesn't, but so the subsequent 7 movies have part in the title. And from here on out, we don't have part in the title. And it also means that the universe the other movies are set in, the plot, is not necessarily directly connected with the first 8 movies. So I guess that's how the movies develop from this, because nobody following part 8 could come up with a logical explanation on how they could turn a dead child into the new Jason. I guess the 9th movie tried to do that in a way, only without really explaining that it's related to part 8. So let's talk about part 9. Or, sorry, the 9th installment. So, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, which is a ludicrous title, came out in 1993. And I think this might be, for a lot of people, one of the worst movies in the franchise. And I can see where they're coming from. But I like this. I find it to be highly entertaining. So I think what the biggest issue of this movie is, it feels like it's not really related to the other movies, as talking about world building and having a streamlined story, a universe wherein you know the rules. That even with fantasy and weird shit, you kind of need established rules for a universe or the movie franchise to be believable, as in a premise you buy. So things need to add up. You can't just throw in shit and hope the audience will buy it. So the movie starts with it starts looking like the ending of any other Friday the 13th movie, only that it's a setup by the military, who then shoots Jason to smithereens. I like that scene. It's entertaining. It's also very 90s. This movie is very 90s. Then this doctor who is performing the autopsy of Jason decides to eat Jason's heart and thus becomes possessed by Jason. So yes, this movie, technically speaking, has Jason as the main killer, but actually is this African-American doctor running around killing people. Does this work? On paper, it shouldn't, and I understand why this annoys people. But the kills are fine, and everything else just is kind of entertaining about this movie, so why not? And it gets even weirder from that point. It's a complete departure from the series, but I don't understand how you can't just at least low-key like this movie. It has the glove from Nightmare on Elm Street in it. It has the Necronomicon from Evil Dead. It has slug tongues. It has decomposing humans and rubber monsters and hellhounds. I mean, how can't you at least just enjoy the insanity of it? It has a lot of insane things in it that are just good, and apparently, I mean, with the Freddy glove, this movie sets up for Freddy versus Jason. That I'm really happy became a thing. Because it ends with the Freddy glove being introduced over the Jason mask. These shared universes are always a difficult thing to pull off, but with the Friday the 13th series already being a bit wacky and just being there for being entertaining, nothing special, nothing deeper, yeah, go in whatever direction you want. It's definitely not something that can live up to the expectations and the themes and the visuals of the first 8 movies. But also, it's a different decade. Maybe it's fine to move on and try something different. So yeah, I can still really enjoy this. It plays homage to Sam Raimi and Cronenberg and does a lot of things very well. Yeah. I realized I said something incorrect before. I said hellhounds. I meant hell hands because yeah, Jason literally goes to hell in this one. He's dragged to hell. Yeah, it's cool. Watch it. Jason X, or Jason Goes to Space, is the 10th installment of the franchise, and it came out in 2001. And this one is quite possibly the wackiest of all of the movies, as after everything that happened in the 9th movie, I guess they just thought they could get away with anything. And I'm quite sure they're right about this, because this is a very entertaining movie. It takes place almost 450 years after the previous film, after Jason has been cryonically frozen? Not chronologically frozen, that would be something quite different. Anyway, he has been frozen and is now unfrozen at defrozen at the space station, where some students want to study him and what kind of thing he is, I guess. Him not really being human. And the movie has David Cronenberg in it as an acting role, which, wow, okay, sure. Yeah, that's nice. It has definitely some of the most memorable kills of the franchise. Jason falls and then awakens from this cryogenic chamber and freezes this woman's head in liquid nitrogen and then smashes it against the counter. And that's a very effective kill. It looks great. It also has the famous or infamous sleeping bag kill. That's the really good scene. It introduces a lot of nice ideas and utilizes them well. It's not the best movie in the franchise, but it is good. It is yeah, you could definitely watch this. If you can suspend your disbelief, and you should have done that if you watched at least part 7 or part 9, then yeah, this one should be great fun. This should entertain you and a group of friends. This would be a really good movie for a movie night. If you want to watch stupid schlock, it doesn't really get more schlocky than this. Freddy vs. Jason, being the 11th movie in this franchise, came out in 2003. And I must say that I had very little expectations going into this. Basically because the concept sounds so stupid, and the movie came out so many years after both franchises went a bit weird that I didn't really expect anything from it. But I was surprised. I was happily surprised. The plot of the movie is actually not bad. It kind of makes sense when you think about the two different universes. So Freddy Krueger has lost most of his power because people have stopped fearing him, and therefore and stopped dreaming. I mean, they are suppressing their dreams, so he no longer can. He has lost access to the source of his powers. So he brings Jason back to life so that Jason can stir up trouble and stir up fears again, which should then empower Freddy, and it does. But Jason can't be controlled by Freddy, meaning that the two have to clash. So what this movie gets right is it's an entertaining premise. It actually uses the two villains well. It the scenes they have together are actually good, and also all the human characters in it are also have a role to play in this, and they are doing a good job. The kills are great. There are some really funny lines in it. The acting is not outright terrible. I don't have much bad to say about this one. It's yeah, again, it's good. It's good. I would also like to talk more about the cinematography of this one. I haven't really talked about it much with the other movies in the franchise, but I would say it's done well. It doesn't rely on too many annoying tropes, such as shaky cam. However, the movie has a bit too much CGI for its own good. I really, it doesn't really age well, unfortunately. And some other issues with it is yes, there are some good kills, there are some really great kills, there just not that many of them. There's a really, really good rampage scene with the Jason that I really liked, but that's about it. That's what you get. It could have used more kills. It could have used a bit. It could have overindulged on it a bit. I would say. I think that would have benefited this. But yeah, that's just how I would have thought it could be improved. Overall, yeah, not a bad film. Definitely worth a watch. Still fun. And I really wish I could end on this high note because this is a high note. It's not the highest note, but it's a high note for a franchise with 11 movies. But oh no, we had to get the remake. God damn it. The remake, simply titled Friday the 13th, came out in 2009. And this is, without a doubt, the worst movie in the franchise. It is ugly. The plot is terrible. The acting is terrible. The effects and cinematography is terrible. None of the kills are interesting. There is nothing in this movie that makes it worth just a single minute of your life. Just stay clear of this film. I'm not even going to talk more about it. This one made me mad. So don't watch it unless you want to torture yourself, because if you're a masochist, maybe this will be the thing for you. Anyway, so I guess I'll wrap this up. It's time to wrap up. Yeah, wrap up time. Yeah. For a franchise with 12 movies, I would say I'm surprised that there are more movies that are good or even great than terrible. I'm surprised at with the amount of quality you get here, even especially considering that every movie, or almost, there were almost no recurring directors, screenwriters, or producers for any of these movies, which also explains why they are so different from each other, or at least both of them feel different from the movies coming before and after. But they are good. I mean, they understood what makes a Friday the 13th movie work, at least half of the time, whereas some really got it wrong, and then some, in my opinion, got it wrong but made something good anyway. So this is where I will come in with my recommendations, with my overall verdict for this franchise. Start with the first two movies. I think you would not waste your time with the first two movies. They are a good introduction not only to the franchise but also to early slasher movies, because they are really a bit above run of the mill slasher movies from this period. They're entertaining. They have good kills. They have some decent setup and payoff. Yeah, overall they are fine. The third one is good. Doesn't have the best kills, but overall is a good film. I would definitely give that a recommendation. Fourth movie, 100% recommend. It's amazing. It's really, really good. Yes, it ticks all the boxes. The fifth movie, no. Just no, don't watch that one. Sixth movie, yes, entertaining. You can watch that and have a good time. Seventh movie, unless you are a completionist, I would say go to the last 20, 15, 20 minutes of this one and watch those. don't watch the rest. The ending of this is fantastic. The rest is a pile of garbage. Eighth movie, Manhattan. Yes, I like it. I had a lot of fun watching it. A lot of people feel like it's a letdown. I don't know. I don't understand them. It's a good Friday the 13th movie. It's yeah, definitely watch it. I would say. Jason Goes to Hell might be a terrible Friday the 13th film, but it's a great film. It's very entertaining. I mean, maybe I'm not going as far as great, but it's entertaining. It's a good film. I don't see how, unless you're a bit fanatical about the franchise, that it has to tick certain boxes, can't seek more strange and insane territory. Because this is a huge diversion, I will admit that. But if you can accept that, yes, this is enjoyable. It is. I know. Yeah, definitely. I can recommend it. Then we have, of course, Jason X. A lot of people who do like Jason X do not like Jason Goes to Hell. But I would say if you can accept the stupidity and insanity of Jason X, I don't see why it would be such a big stretch to like Jason Goes to Hell. Because that is a good. I mean, yeah, they're equally stupid and equally fun because of it. Very different movies. I would actually say Jason Goes to Hell might be a more interesting movie than Jason X, but Jason X does have some of the best kills of the franchise. Yeah, I mean, both are actually recommendable in my opinion. Freddy vs. Jason, yeah, good. It's a good. If you like the other movies in the franchise, yeah, I can recommend it. It's good. The remake, just don't watch it. Don't even look it up. Don't even Google it. You don't want that in your search history. So I think what I should do here, because I've recommended a lot of these movies, if you if you want to have a Friday the 13th movie marathon with your friends, so if you should pick 3 movies to watch with them in one sitting, I would go with 4, 6, and 8 if they're more into the traditional stuff. If you think you and your friends can survive the insanity, I would probably say 4, 6, and then maybe Jason Goes to Hell or Jason X or Freddy vs. Jason, because I think all of those 3 movies have an equal quality to them but are very different. And I therefore think that it would be a nice way to shake it up so it doesn't feel as monotonous as it would be to watch 3 quite similar Friday the 13th movies in a row. So yes, I would definitely recommend that. Instead of if you want to watch the 80s movies, instead of Jason Goes to Manhattan, you could watch the first one or the third one, because I don't know, maybe they are a bit tonally different. So the fourth and the sixth are the strongest movies in the franchise. But honestly, there's so many movies in the mid tier or upper mid tier or lower mid tier that it is actually difficult to make this recommendation. But yes, 4 and 6, and then pretty much anything else from the mid tier would make for an entertaining evening, I would say, for anyone who likes these type of movies. I know not everybody likes them, but if you don't, I don't know why you have just been sitting through all these minutes with me talking about them. So yeah, I think that's it. This is, I don't know what I will be talking about next. I hope the movies will turn out to be just as great as the Friday the 13th movies are. Bye.